Act 1. The Drowned Mona Lisa. In the final decades of the 19th century, Paris was the undisputed capital of the world. It was the heart of La Belle Époque, the beautiful era, a glittering period of artistic flourishing, scientific discovery, and cultural revolution. The Eiffel Tower pierced the clouds for the first time. The Moulin Rouge opened its doors, and the city's grand boulevards bustled with life, art, and ambition. But beneath this shimmering surface, a darker, colder reality flowed silently through the city's heart. The River Seine. The Seine was more than just a river. It was a mirror to the city's soul, reflecting both its splendor and its misery. For every artist finding inspiration on its banks, there was a soul in despair seeking a final, silent escape in its murky depths. The Paris city morgue, located just behind Notre Dame Cathedral, saw a grim, steady parade of the river's victims. In an era before modern identification methods, these unnamed dead were put on public display behind a large glass window, a practice known as l'exposition de corps. It became a strange and macabre form of public entertainment. Crowds of Parisians, from the working class to the bourgeoisie, would come to gaze upon the dead, a phenomenon the papers called voir la dalle, to see the slab. They were driven by morbid curiosity, the hope of finding a missing loved one, or simply the thrill of staring death in the face. Most bodies were disfigured by the water, their features swollen and unrecognizable, their expressions locked in the agony of their final moments. But one day, in the late 1880s, the attendants at the morgue brought in a body from the Seine that silenced the gawking crowds. She was young, estimated to be no more than 16 years old. Her clothes were simple, suggesting she was a working-class girl who had come to the city seeking a better life. There were no signs of violence on her body, no bruises or broken bones to suggest a struggle. This alone was not unusual. What was extraordinary, what stopped everyone in their tracks, was her face. Death had not marred her features. Instead, it had sculpted them into an expression of profound and unsettling peace. Her skin was pale and smooth, her cheekbones high. But it was her mouth that captivated everyone. Her lips were parted slightly, curved into a gentle, knowing smile. It was not the rictus of a drowning victim, but the serene, enigmatic smile of someone lost in a pleasant dream. She looked as though she possessed a secret she had taken with her to the grave. The hardened morgue workers, men who saw death every day, were so moved by her beauty that they gave her a name befitting of her mystery. L'inconnue de la Seine, the unknown woman of the Seine. To others, she was simply the drowned Mona Lisa. Act 2. The Mask of a Ghost. Days turned into weeks, and still, she lay on the cold slab behind the glass, unclaimed. The crowds continued to come, now drawn not just by morbid curiosity, but by the legend of the beautiful, smiling girl. They looked for signs of recognition, whispered theories about her origins, but no one stepped forward to give her a name. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend to someone, yet she remained an orphan in death. According to the regulations of the time, an unclaimed body could only be kept for a short period before it had to be buried in a pauper's grave, lost to an unmarked patch of earth and forgotten forever. For one man, a pathologist at the Paris morgue, this fate seemed a crime against beauty itself. His name is lost to history, but his actions would ensure the young woman's face would achieve immortality. He was haunted by her expression. It was a face that did not belong in a place of death and decay. It was a work of art that deserved to be preserved. He could not save her life, but perhaps he could save her face. And so, he made a decision that was highly unusual for the time. He commissioned a moelier, a specialized craftsman, to create a death mask. The process was an art form in itself. A thin layer of oil was carefully applied to her skin to prevent the plaster from sticking. Then, a delicate mixture of wet plaster was gently layered over her entire face, carefully pushed into every contour to capture each subtle detail. It was a strange and intimate act, creating a permanent record of a fleeting moment between life and oblivion. After the plaster had set, the mold was carefully removed. This negative impression was then used to cast a positive image. When the final plaster mask was revealed, the result was breathtaking. It was her. The serene expression, the high cheekbones, the faint, otherworldly smile, all were perfectly preserved. The mask had captured not just a likeness, but an essence. It was a perfect, tangible echo of the ghost who had captivated the city. The pathologist's mission was a success. The girl's body would be buried, but her face, frozen in that moment of serene mystery, would live on. He had created a relic, and soon it would find its worshippers. Act 3. The Muse of Paris. The pathologist hung the original mask in his office, but the story of its creation and the haunting beauty it possessed could not be contained. Soon, copies of the mask began to be produced from the original mold, and they found a ready market in a city obsessed with art, beauty, and the romance of tragedy. The face of Lincoln began to appear in the windows of workshops and cellars throughout Paris, and from there, it made its way into the heart of Parisian cultural life. It became a fixture, a morbidly chic decoration in the homes and studios of the city's bohemian elite. To the artists and writers of the symbolist movement, she was the ultimate muse. She represented everything they were fascinated with: the intersection of beauty and death, the purity of an Ophelia-like figure, and the profound mystery of the unknown. Her smile was a blank canvas onto which they could project their own ideas about life, love, and mortality. The great existentialist writer Albert Camus, in his novel The Fall, would later describe her as the drowned Mona Lisa, cementing her nickname in literary history. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote about a mask he saw in a shop, inspired by her story. The author Richard Le Gallienne wrote a romanticized novella, The Worshipper of the Image, in which a poet falls in love with a mask and is ultimately driven to madness and death by it. Anais Nin and Vladimir Nabokov were also said to have been fascinated by her tale. It was rumored that even Pablo Picasso kept a copy of her mask in his studio. She was the perfect enigma. Was her smile one of heavenly bliss, a sign that she had welcomed death? Or was it a sign of a life unlived, a tragic what-if? Her anonymity was key to her power. Because she was no one, she could be anyone. A spurned lover, a runaway from a wealthy family, a simple shop girl with a secret sorrow. She became a silent confidant to a generation of artists, a pale, plaster face that absorbed the dreams and anxieties of a rapidly changing world. She was a cultural phenomenon, a piece of folklore cast in stone, all while her true name and story remained lost to the silent depths of the Seine. Act 4. The most kissed face on earth. For over half a century, the story of Lincoln remained largely a European artistic obsession. Her face hung on walls, a silent, beautiful ghost from a bygone era. But in the 1950s, her fate would become entwined with a story of life, not death, and her face would begin a new journey, one that would make it the most famous and physically touched face in the world. This new chapter begins not in Paris, but in Stavanger, Norway, with a man named Asmund Lertle. Lertle was a successful publisher who had pivoted his company to making wooden toys and, later, realistic dolls and soft plastics. He was an innovator, constantly looking for new ways to use materials. One day, his life was changed forever when his 2-year-old son, Tor, fell into the water near their home. Lertle rushed to pull the boy out. Tor was limp, blue, and lifeless. Acting on pure instinct, Lertle cleared his son's airway and began forcing air into his lungs. Miraculously, Tor revived. The harrowing experience left a permanent mark on Lertle. Years later, in 1958, he was approached by a group of doctors, including the Austrian anesthesiologist Peter Safar, a pioneer who was developing a new emergency procedure. It combined mouth-to-mouth resuscitation with chest compressions, a technique he called cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR. The doctors needed a training tool, a realistic mannequin that would allow ordinary people to practice this life-saving technique without fear or hesitation. They needed something that could simulate a human body, and they came to Asmund Lertle, the expert in soft plastics. Lertle accepted the challenge, driven by the memory of saving his own son. He knew the mannequin, which he decided to call River needed to have a female face, believing students would be less hesitant to practice on a woman. He wanted a face that was natural and peaceful, not one that looked like a medical dummy or a corpse in distress. He wanted a face that people would feel comfortable approaching. And then he remembered a mask, a beautiful, serene death mask that had hung on the wall of his grandparents' house when he was a boy. He had been captivated by its story and its peaceful expression. It was the face of L'inconnu de la Seine. Lertle decided this would be the face of River Seine. He felt its serene beauty was the perfect antidote to the panic of a real-life emergency. The dead girl from the Seine would now become the face of life-saving. Since the first River Seine was created in 1960, it's estimated that over 500 million people have been trained in CPR using a mannequin bearing her face. Billions of breaths have been given into her lifeless lips. The nameless girl who died alone in a cold river had, through a series of incredible chances, become the face that has helped save countless lives. She had become the most kissed face in human history. Act 5. Whispers in the Water. This incredible second act in her story, her transformation from a tragic muse to a symbol of life, still leaves the original question unanswered. Who was this girl? The identity of L'inconnu is a puzzle with no solution, a mystery that has only deepened with time. The lack of evidence and the passage of over a century mean we are left with nothing but theories. The most common and simplest theory is suicide. In late 19th century Paris, life was incredibly difficult for a young, working-class woman. The city could be a lonely and brutal place. The Seine was a tragically common choice for those who had lost all hope. This theory would align with a lack of violent marks on her body, but it clashes profoundly with her expression. Medical experts have pointed out that drowning is a violent, agonizing death. It is highly improbable that a victim of suicide by drowning would be found with a smile of blissful contentment. This leads to the second major theory, murder. Perhaps she was killed by a lover, a client, or a stranger. To explain the lack of struggle and the peaceful expression, this theory often suggests poison. If she were poisoned or drugged and then placed in the river after she was already unconscious or dead, it would account for her serene state. However, the forensic science of the 1880s was primitive. An autopsy at the time would have been unlikely to detect many common poisons, leaving no evidence behind. Her story could be that of a perfect, unsolved murder. Over the decades, more romantic and elaborate theories have surfaced. Some have claimed she was an actress from Hungary. Others have spun tales of her being the illegitimate daughter of a Russian aristocrat who had a tragic love affair in Paris. Many people have come forward claiming the girl in the mask was their long-lost relative. But every single claim has failed to stand up to scrutiny. There are no dental records, no fingerprints, no DNA. All we have is the mask. Some researchers have even questioned the entire origin story, suggesting the mask wasn't a death mask at all, but was sculpted from a living model. This would explain the peaceful smile, but it contradicts the foundational legend that gives the face its power. Ultimately, every path leads to a dead end. She is a ghost whose past refuses to be unearthed. Act 6. The Legacy of the Unknown. The story of L'inconnu de la Seine is a journey through the greatest of life's paradoxes. She is a girl defined by her anonymity, yet her face is one of the most recognizable on earth. She is a symbol born from a lonely death, who became a global icon for saving lives. Her tale begins in the grim reality of a 19th century morgue, but finds its purpose in the bright, sterile classrooms of 21st century medical training. The journey of her face is astounding. From the dark waters of the Seine, to a pathologist's lab, to a plaster cast, to the walls of Europe's greatest artists, and finally, to the production lines of a Norwegian toy factory. Each step of her journey seems guided by an impossible twist of fate. She is a testament to how a single random event, a pathologist's decision to preserve a beautiful face, can ripple through time, creating a legacy that no one could have ever imagined. Today, it is estimated that her face, through the resusci and mannequin, has helped train enough people to have saved well over 2 million lives. It is a staggering number, an incredible legacy for someone whose own life was likely cut tragically short. And so we are left with the final, haunting question. Who was she? Was she a victim, a lover, an artist, a dreamer? We will never know. She remains forever L'inconnu, the unknown woman. But perhaps her true identity no longer matters. Perhaps her purpose was not to be found in the life she lived, but in the lives she would save long after she was gone. Perhaps, finally, that is the secret behind her eternal, enigmatic smile.